So I'm going to do a brief PowerPoint to just give an overview about what the HLC is, who they serve, and what the strategic plan is and what our goals are for this public forum. So I'm going to, and then we'll open it up to the public for kind of dialogue and questions and discussions. And we have 2 members of the public here in person, we are pleased to announce. And with that, I'm going to share my screen, so please bear with me for one moment. All right, we can see that, great. We're very grateful for all of our technology to be working this evening, so if I seem giddy, that's why. Oh, this is, as discussed, this is public forum number 2 for our Deschutes County Historic Preservation Strategic Plan. And for some reason, it is not advancing. Oh, it's very delayed. So I'm going to start with a brief welcome and introductions. We sort of already did that, a brief overview of the HLC. What is the strategic plan itself, then the actual public forum, and then we'll talk about next steps in the process. We actually have already done our introductions. I believe we do not have any additional commissioners on the Zoom, correct, Trevor?
No one's on the Zoom.
Okay. And as noted, we have our chair, Kelly Madden, here. And we also have Will Groves, our planning manager. He is in attendance as well. Hi, Will.
And I apologize for not introducing Will when he came in.
He's waving from the back. Thanks for being here, everybody. All right. Onwards. So a little bit about the HLC. It was established in 1980, actually, by ordinance number PL 21, and that established the HLC, the Historic Landmarks Commission, and it developed a process by which to evaluate and designate historic structures. And then starting in 2011, the HLC split off essentially, and now it serves only the unincorporated county, so everything outside of the cities, as well as, in a kind of a little wrinkle, at the City of Sisters, which we're very happy to have. The cities of Bend and Lapine and Redmond, they each have their own HLCs, so they operate independently. So as anyone who's kind of wants to deal with historic resources within those city limits, they should reach out to those cities' respective HLCs. And I know sometimes it can be a little bit complicated with those boundaries, and if anybody ever comes to the county and we need to direct them to the city, we will happily do so, and vice versa.
And if I may interrupt, it also includes, the Tumalo area, the area of the Skyline Forest, Plainview, just all the way into Sisters and Sisters Country, and South County and North County.
Yes.
So we take care of the outliers.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And, the thing that's interesting about Deschutes County is so much of it is actually federal land. So really, what we have, kind of what we can actually touch is limited, but we try to do the best we can with what we have available to us. So the HLC is an advisory body for issues about concerning historic and cultural resources. These are sometimes referred to as Goal 5 resources, which is a statewide planning goal that kind of Goal 5 addresses everything from wildlife to cultural resources, historic resources. It's kind of all of the preservation of important resources. In this case, we're talking about historic resources. And as noted previously, it's for unincorporated Deschutes County as well as the City of Sisters. The HLC it also reviews development applications for any alterations to designated historic sites. Admittedly, we haven't had many of those recently at all, but they do pop up from here and there, and the HLC would be that body that helps address those. The HLC also organizes and participates in May Preservation Month, which is an annual tradition that has been, I would say it canceled is the word for the last couple of years because of COVID, unfortunately. And I know that certain jurisdictions are trying to start up some activities for this May. We are probably going to be on hold at the county level still to try to get our ducks in a row, but do something really robust for next year. Preservation Month is super fun. There's anything from kind of exhibits and walking tours and just all kinds of outreach. Sometimes there's people in costume. It's just fun things that that explain, including our chair, that explain the value of historic resources and kind of the processes, and just tries to get the word out. And to that end, the HLC is trying to collaborate more with other HLCs. For instance, the City of Bend, the City of Redmond. They have quite active HLCs, being that they are cities and they do have a little more activity, so we're trying to coordinate further with them. And that's something we can talk about more as a goal, a potential goal for the strategic plan. And lastly, the HLC develops and completes CLG grant tasks. And CLG means Certified Local Government, and I will explain what that means in a bit. This strategic plan initiative is actually part of a CLG grant. It's kind of cyclical because in this case, the strategic plan is paid for by, or this process is paid for by this grant, but then also this process helps identify future things to do in future grants. So it's kind of coming at it from both sides. And that's administered by the State Office of Historic Preservation. This is just a slide that explains our HLC membership. All of our, we have five voting members and 1 ex officio member. And we are open, I believe, in our founding documents to have additional ex officio members as applicable. And members serve for 4-year terms. No, and I just said most of that, but 1 member may also be appointed by the City of Sisters, which we have, and there are no term limits.
And the exciting thing about no term limits is the people that started on the commission that were on that last slide, nobody has left the commission. So we've had 1 addition, and some people have moved, but it's still the same original group because we really are devoted and really enjoy what we do.
And there's a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge among the commissioners. It's really fantastic, the resources that they each are as individuals and as members of the group. So staff is very appreciative of that. Back to the Certified Local Government. CLG is a federal program from the National Park Service. It's administered, as I noted, by the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, as we commonly call it. In order to become a CLG, you have to meet certain qualifications to become certified, and that lets you receive grants through this program as well as technical assistance. Those requirements include things like you have to have a historic preservation code, you have to have a historic landmarks commission, that kind of thing. So we've done that a while ago, and every year we've been receiving CLG grants, and I will explain that more on the next slide. The CLG grants are non-competitive, which means that I believe as long as you meet the basic criteria, you receive these grants. They fund all kinds of historic preservation work, reconnaissance level surveys, which are, the first tier of exploring your historic resources within a jurisdiction. A lot of public education and a lot of training. So those things can take many forms. They can be printed materials, it can be actual activities, it can be educational workshops, all kinds of things. These grants are usually between $5,000 and $20,000 for a roughly, it's just under 2-year period. Maybe it's about 1.5. And the CLG in question has to provide a 50-50 match. So this cycle, we received $12,000, and so the county is providing $12,000 of additional funds or in-kind time. Most of that is going for specifically City of Sisters projects. A lot of public education. They are currently working on a story map, which is kind of a fancier version of a website that kind of lets you dig into some maps, and it's just an additional degree of interactivity, promoting their recent survey, reconnaissance level survey. So looking at these properties, where are they on the map, then drilling down and looking at photos and historic documents. They're currently working on that, and I believe we're going to get an update from them on their progress at the next HLC meeting on May 2nd. The grant's also covering, excuse me, the HLC Policies and Procedures Manual. This is something we just recently completed. It is not a super glamorous task, but it's super helpful. It just explains a lot of the code that kind of provides the basis for the HLC's activities and procedures and policies, and explains what Goal 5 resources are. It's kind of the manual that explains everything about what it means to be an HLC and an HLC commissioner. So our intent is to have this, once it's blessed by the Board of County Commissioners later this year, have this made available to the public and to future commissioners to see kind of what the expectations are. And lastly, the strategic plan, as I mentioned, that is funded by this grant, and the strategic plan is going to look at the next 5 years and what we can do as an HLC. So, the strategic plan. Here I have an image of the last strategic plan, which covered 2015 to 2020. That was adopted in 2015, so we're a little bit behind. But a strategic plan just allows the HLC to connect with the communities it serves, to figure out what their priorities are, what kind of programs they should be pursuing. It's different from the manual because it's a forward-looking document. It's saying, hey, what do we want to do? Do we need to, increase our education? Do we want to increase our technical knowledge? Actual kind of action items, and that's why we're here today. And it helps inform future CLG grants, things that we can apply for technical and financial assistance in future years. So a little bit more about that plan. It's divided into goals, objectives, and actions, along with a lot of background information as well. And this is just an example from the 2015 plan. The goals are kind of general. In this case, it was collaborate, strengthen the network of historic preservation and community partners through collaboration. The next more specific tier is the objective. In this case, it was to improve facilitation of historic preservation in the region, to increase the visibility of and participation in historic preservation efforts throughout the county. And then lastly, it goes to specific actions, and these are things that you can actually kind of touch and get your hands on.
And we did them.
And you did.
That's the most amazing part.
Strategic plans, it works. And I was not present for that, but yeah, it established the Deschutes Historical Society as the hub of historic preservation programs, and supported and engaged in Historic Preservation Month activities. And that's an ongoing thing, but it's nice to see from the chair that these things have been, addressed and specifically done. And so it's just nice to have these kind of all listed out and all arrived at by some sort of consensus through a planning process. And we are in that planning process now. So part of this is outreach, just in order to find out people's kind of goals or what could we be doing better as a commission. Those consist of these public forums that we're here today for. We have an online survey, and I'll give the address at the end of this presentation. It's open for about 2 more days, I believe, till the 22nd. Thus far, we've received about 25 responses, which I think is great. We will be compiling that later and providing that input to the HLC to help them do their planning, as well as individual stakeholder interviews. In our last HLC meeting, the commission identified certain stakeholders, whether from nonprofit groups or state agencies, people who would just be helpful to talk to and find out their goals. Are there any things that they see from the outside that the Deschutes County Historic Landmarks Commission could be doing to focus on historic preservation? So staff is going to summarize all of this.
How many interviews did you do?
Thus far, I've done 1, and I have 2 more scheduled.
Great.
One is tomorrow. Yeah, the net we cast did not get a huge response, but we will probably follow up with some of those. But
you know what? We have a net.
Yes, we do. We do have a net, and I think any input is great input, and I
Yeah.
think whatever we can get, we will incorporate, and it'll be
Exactly.
helpful. So, yeah. So staff will take this input, and in turn kind of help funnel these into potential goals, objectives, and actions. And we'll look at the old plan, and we'll look at kind of the input we received and try to shape those into new goals, objectives, and actions, or revised ones if that's the case. And staff will then draft a plan document to show to the HLC in a July meeting, and we'll go from there. The eventual goal is to get it adopted by the HLC, and then subsequently adopted, the Board of County Commissioners has to kind of vote on their side to officially adopt it, and then it becomes an official document of the Historic Landmarks Commission. So it is a slightly short process, but I think we're trucking along and we're getting good input. So this staff member is pleased with the way it's going. So that was a lot. This is a brief timeline. I don't know if you can, well, those of you in the room probably cannot read that, but I'll just briefly go over it. We started in March, kicking off the scope of work. In April this month, we're doing the public meetings, the interviews, all of the input. Staff is going to compile that information for an HLC meeting in May. That is when a discussion of the goals, objectives, and actions for this new plan will be solidified or just worked on. Then between May and July, staff will work to draft a new historic preservation plan based on that input. In July, the HLC will have a meeting to receive this plan. And as noted before, in August, we hope to have it adopted. Obviously, if we encounter any roadblocks or need significant changes, we can work with that. But this is our ideal project timeline. And this is also available on the project website if you want to peruse it. All right, and now to the fun part, which is the public forum. The floor is open. And I will say, because it's a pretty intimate group, I have one slide, the next slide has a few kind of talking points if there's certain things that people want to discuss, but we're also very happy to have public participants just come up to the mic and talk about their concerns or their thoughts about historic preservation or ask questions. So we're pretty flexible here. And I'm just going to show this. Are there issues and challenges facing preservation in the rural county or the city of Sisters? Do you have any thoughts on the goals for the plan? Do we need to promote more things? Do we need training, networking between HLCs or documentation? Or how does this affect the public? You know, it's one thing to have this commission that does their internal work. How do we engage the public? And hopefully we'll hear some.
On a very limited budget.
On a very, very limited budget, that is true. So with that, I'm going to open the floor to the.
So I would
members of the
like to
public.
invite anyone that would like to speak this evening to come to the microphone and introduce yourself, and then you can say whatever you want to say.
And if you're just here to listen, that is also okay as well.
Yes.
Oh, that's all right. I can brave the microphone.
Thank you. And if I may, if you could just give your name and kind of where you live, if you don't mind.
Sure. So my name is Frances Mann, and I'm an attorney. I just work here at Francis Hanson and Martin, right across the street. So I saw that this was going on, and we decided it would be a good idea. We own a house in the downtown historic district that we're redoing. So we're working with the Landmarks Commission at the city level. And then we're living currently in Sisters because our house is 8 feet up in the air and doesn't have any utilities connected to it right now. So,
Oh, the one in Bend.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking, wow, they're doing that in Bend and living that in Sisters. Good heavens.
Oh, no. That's-
I knew
that's
you
why
need a
we're-
cookie.
Yeah, that's why we're in Sisters. So kind
Okay.
of dueling interests there, but both overlapping to here. And we listened to the Landmarks Commission meeting, which was last night, and they mentioned the survey that you guys were doing, and they weren't really aware of the survey. And so we've looked at the survey and kind of found what you're doing, but acknowledge that they may be taking some cues from you and vice versa, if there is any overlapping communication or.
We just haven't in the last, since COVID, the communication has been pretty nil.
Yeah, we've been trying to get some, before each meeting, we kind of check in with them and get some updates, but it's very high level, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. So just curious in the process and learning more about how all of it works, of course. I guess my input, not sure about our input for the strategic plan, but yeah, preserving historic resources is very important. And it's good to keep the past in the present, but how do we make that affordable and keep the public engaged so that they don't become disengaged, disenfranchised, and very frustrated by the process? and then see what other landmark commissions across the country are doing, or even within Oregon, and how they're staying current and how they keep their communities involved. I think those would be my suggestions.
Those are excellent suggestions.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. We appreciate input.
Sure, I wish there were more people here, but I understand also.
If I may ask questions, and it's not
Oh,
to
yeah.
kind of creep on the City of Bend's process, because I'm just curious. I'm sure there, did you have to do a lot of research? Was it hard to figure out? Because I think there's a perception that if you own a historic property, it's going to be a nightmare to do anything to. And in certain cities it is, and I have lived in one in back east, and it can be hard, but it also, balancing that preservation with knowing what you can and can't do, was it hard to find that information? Is it hard to find what you're kind of allowed to do or not allowed to do, or figure out what those parameters were?
Yeah.
Like, is that something that in general could be improved kind of as your experience as a homeowner?
Sure. So I don't want to speak ill of the Landmarks Commission at all, and our project isn't complete. So that's some background. But yeah, I think as an attorney, I have a unique skill set that allows me to do a lot more research and know that there is a city code and
Right.
there is a county code,
Right.
which can give me an advantage in some instances. But most of it is very gray. It's a lot of subjective interpretation of what is in the district and how many homes I can find have front steps that look like the front steps that I want to have.
Right, and as a quasi-legislative commission, we may look like we've got some clout, but there is precious little, that we can actually do beyond just suggestion and help and a little bit of money and grants and all that, but it's a very little,
Yeah, and so for us, like first time, homeowners here in Bend, it's an onerous and expensive process just to apply, not to do any of the work. Like we had to hire somebody to create design plans and then help us present at the hearing. And so that's a burden on people, and if they don't understand that can be really tricky.
Yeah.
We participated in meetings leading up to the month where we would have our hearing, just to try to get a feel. And there was one homeowner that presented for himself, which you can do, and his application got rejected because he didn't have enough recommendations from window companies about what the windows should be and if they needed to be replaced, and that sets them back, a couple months, and sometimes for people that's just not feasible. And so having that information up front and knowing how to get to it.
But what happens if they don't use those windows and they go ahead and do the house? These are the things I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a code violation.
Okay.
I'm not going to give legal advice, but it's
I just thought she's in the hot seat, let's ask.
to catch me in that trap. But yeah, it's a code violation, and so it can be, I think, up to a misdemeanor or a fine if somebody reports you. Generally, what happens, what we've seen in the neighborhood, is people build a really modern fence, and all the neighbors get really upset about it, and they go to the city, and then the city tells them they need to tear down the fence, and then they tear it down.
I don't think in the county you have to get, it can't be over like 2 feet or something without getting special permission to get it built or whatever. I know there's a lot of rules in the county.
Yeah, it depends on where you
Yeah,
are.
right.
Yeah. So,
So were you even aware that there was even a commission existed?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
And what do you think is, just because I'd like to know, what do you think is like a good way to get information to people? I mean, I don't know if you were ever around when we did Historic Preservation Month, but we had it one year, and we used the old post office, which is downtown, and everyone
yeah.
dressed up, and we did a lot of really fun things, but I'm just wondering, what is the way to get to people? People don't really read the newspaper anymore. We don't have a HLC Instagram.
Not yet.
Or the Twitter, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's tricky, just because there is so much negative connotation around it,
Right,
just to reframe it in a positive light,
right.
yeah, is hard.
Yeah. It's almost like it needs a rebrand. you
Yeah.
know?
And we think of ourselves as the Deschutes County people, us, our commission, we think of ourselves as such, happy, excited, bubbly people. We don't think of ourselves as someone that would be like, you have the wrong window sash.
Right.
So that's really interesting to see what the view would be.
I mean, admittedly, we just have fewer property, it's,
Right.
the concentration is so much less.
We have arbor glyphs and tin can dumps and,
Different things, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just different. It's a different built environment.
Right.
And it's, yeah, I mean, they bubble up every once in a while, but it's not, it's generally not that many kind of homeowners.
But it's just really thrilling that you came and talked to us tonight, because it's very exciting. This is not a commission that has a lot of, unless it's a water issue and a canal issue. There's usually not a lot of people here, so we appreciate that.
Sure. Did you have any other questions?
I guess just general, I mean, like you said, as an attorney, you kind of know the channels to already go through. I think what I am struggling with is just outreach, is getting to people and getting people either interested in preservation in the first place, or just aware of kind of, if they buy a house, of what they have to do and kind of, or what they can't do and all of that, and the best way to find people and to get them interested and to know the processes. I know the county processes, just for any development, can be hard for just the average citizen who's not a lawyer and or not a planner. And that's something we struggle with, just getting that information out in general. So I'm always kind of looking for ways to help get the word out and educate people. And I don't know what the answer is, besides Instagram.
Yeah, maybe a Realtors Association,
Yeah.
doing a lunch or going to speak to them.
That's a good idea. We have good relationships with all the kind of the builders groups and the realtors groups, and we talk about them for other planning related stuff, but not so much preservation. That's a great idea.
Just because they either, it's kind of a make it or break it point for a
Yep.
buyer, right? What your realtor thinks, what your
Right.
realtor's presenting to you.
And the more the realtor knows, the better, because we definitely have people coming in where they were not aware of many things, because the realtor didn't know. So that's the more people who know stuff. I think.
And see, I'm like a retired school teacher, and I'm always thinking, let's just make a poster. Let's make a poster. It's like, okay, we could put posters in the office at the realtors' places and a little pamphlet and say, this is what you need to know, or 10 common questions that can be answered for you by the HLC. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Doctor's offices, I don't know. Do you have anything you'd like to add? You don't have to get on the microphone, but you have to say your name and where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Alex Mann. I'm originally from Bend, and in Bend, yeah, between Bend and Sisters at the moment. Yeah, it's such an interesting challenge, because I think most of the county historic sites are probably low visibility. It's hard to see driving by, but it's such a fascinating history where, as you can go way back with it, and it's interesting, and then, as settlers come in, but most of the materials are pretty degradable, like wood.
Yeah.
Wood dries up and kind of like just evaporates in the area, and like tin cans rust, and leather degrades, so it's, it's like,
But we're lucky because like out in the Skyline Forest, I know personally of, because I'm that person that can identify those cans and tell you what they were in the year and all that. But there's a lot of old mills out there, and there's a lot of old barns out there, and there's a lot of old corrals out there, and there's a lot of old leather and old bottles and old things.
I remember, running around as a kid, like you'd find
Yes,
different Depression era
right,
elements that you just wouldn't have known existed.
No.
You just happen upon it. And it's
Right.
fully built. So it's moonshine shacks and
Yeah.
yeah.
all sorts of stuff that it's worth preserving and paying attention to, and it gives good insight into the city of Bend. It's a weird, it's kind of a weird little town that in the county.
Quote you on that.
Is a weird county that, like little booms and busts and
Yeah,
and things like that. Like the Tumalo Reservoir is just a bizarre piece of history.
and that's out, I'm a Tumalo girl, and so that's my area. And that is actually what got me interested in all of this, is trying to figure out what was going on out there. And I don't know if you've been out there, but there's a sign that says, it's a historic site, blah, blah, blah. That was because I was so passionate about all of that stuff. And there's Snow Creek Road, and that's the oldest canal in the county, and, and it's just, and I don't know if you've been to the Camp Polk site, that's the oldest barn in the county and the oldest cemetery in the county. So you should just look up Camp Polk and check that out, because if you're in Sisters, and you're here, you need to go there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, whatever local groups there might be, museums or youth camps or things like that, places that get out and do things.
The problem is people always, and this is as a retired school teacher, and this is what I find all the time. People always think, oh, it's really good to go help the kids. Let's go do the kids. Let's go work with the kids. And the problem is a lot of people don't want to work with kids. And so it's very hard sometimes to find that person that wants to do that. So if you all are those people.
Or if it's just providing information and material for people working with kids already.
Right.
Looking for something to do, look at the Tumalo Reservoir. It's an impressive and interesting
Right.
place. So just some, I don't know.
I don't know if you know that the 1890 John Fremont Trail goes right through the middle of the reservoir as well. I think it's earlier than that, 1840. John C. Fremont on his way from the Dalles do you know, Will, with the cannon, and he came from the Dalles and he marched all his people down through the Tumalo Reservoir, and the roads are still out there.
Yeah, there's some signage in Shevlin Park about that.
Right, that Fremont's Blaze, right, that Fremont Park, and there's marks on the trees out by my house that show it's the 12-mile blaze, and it's from 12 miles from Black Butte to there, and his people made that, and then they kind of camped in the reservoir, and then from there they went to Shevlin Park, and from there to Summer Lake, and then from there to California. So that's very interesting, and I have all that information if you are curious about any of these things. Okay.
Great.
Is there anything else you guys would like to add?
I don't think so.
Well, we thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much. It's always good. I know you're going through the process with Bend, but it's always just helpful to hear people and what you're going through and how that could be better. So, yeah, thank you.
And thanks for participating in
Good luck with your project.
our public forum. And if you need us, you know where we are. Tanya, is there anything else?
Great. No, that was super helpful. I'll just add, just pinning onto that, I think the idea of figuring out how to engage younger people and
Yes.
kids and stuff, I think that's huge. I think sometimes preservation gets relegated to kind of not kids. You know what I mean?
That was very diplomatic. Old retired people?
Well, no, I mean, sometimes it becomes a hobby for exclusively the retired, and I think getting kids involved, and I think I would like to think that most people have some sort of interest in history, and if you can make it real for them, and I think if there's ways that we can kind of pursue that,
I think that next May, since we haven't had the Historic Preservation Month in 2 years, I think next May it'll be a good one.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll have a good one.
I agree. So that's helpful. I think, outreach, and education, and just getting
Yes.
out there, and just, then maybe we'll have more people coming to these things. And, I think just the more the better. And so, I don't see anybody else on the Zoom. I'm going to just go back to sharing my screen for one moment for some closing slides. Bear with me, please. There's a bit of a delay, sorry. All right, and as noted, the survey online, and I'll give that URL in a moment, it's open until the 22nd. It's pretty simple. It asks just about priorities. It has you kind of rank a few priorities and things like, is it better to work on getting more money or educating more people, that kind of thing. It's pretty quick. It takes about less than 10 minutes of people's time. That can be found at Deschutes. It's not a website, a URL that rolls off the tongue, but it's deschutes.org/cd/page/. HLC strategic plan. You can also get to that in a much easier way by just going to the community development webpage and scrolling down to prominent projects, and it's there. And we encourage people to take the survey, and we always encourage people to provide input, whether or not it's within the parameters of this strategic plan, because we love hearing from people.
And usually we have cupcakes, but I didn't think there'd be anyone here tonight, so I didn't bring any cupcakes.
Yeah, that is all I have for my presentation. I don't know if there's any additional discussion or anything.
Any additional discussion before I close the meeting? All right, at this moment, the meeting is closed.